never believed in ghosts. I always thought they were just a figment of people's imagination, a way to explain the unexplainable. But that all changed when I moved to Crimson Hollow. Crimson Hollow was a small town nestled in the mountains. It was the perfect place to escape the hustle and bustle of the city. The town was surrounded by beautiful forests and a crystal-clear lake. The locals were friendly and welcoming, and I quickly made new friends. But there was something strange about Crimson Hollow. Every time I walked down the streets, I felt like someone was watching me. The atmosphere was heavy and eerie, but I brushed it off as my imagination. That is until I moved into my new home. My house was a beautiful Victorian-style mansion, complete with a wraparound porch and a tower. It was situated on the outskirts of town, surrounded by the forest. I was in love with it, and I couldn't wait to make it my own. But as soon as I stepped inside, I knew something was off. The air was cold, despite the warm summer weather. I could hear strange noises coming from the walls, and the floorboards creaked as if someone was walking on them. I tried to ignore it, thinking it was just an old house settling, but the feeling of being watched only intensified. One night, I was awoken by a loud banging on my bedroom door. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding in my chest. I hesitantly got up and opened the door, but no one was there. I brushed it off as a dream and went back to bed. But the next night, the same thing happened. And the night after that, the banging became more frequent, and I could feel a presence in the room with me. I tried to tell my friends about it, but they brushed it off as my imagination, just like I used to do. But I knew something was wrong. I started to do some research on my house and the town, and what I discovered sent chills down my spine. My house was built on top of an old cemetery, and the town has a history of strange occurrences. People have gone missing, and some say their ghosts still haunt the town. I was starting to believe that I was not alone in my house. One night, as I was preparing for bed, I heard a voice whisper my name. I froze, my heart racing. I slowly turned around, but no one was there. I felt a cold breath on my neck, and I knew I had to get out of there. I packed my bags and left the house, never looking back. I stayed with my friends for a while, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I knew I had to go back to my house and confront whatever was haunting it. I returned to Crimson Hollow and made my way to my house. As soon as I stepped inside, I could feel a presence in the room. I walked through the house, searching for any signs of a ghost, and that's when I saw her. In the corner of my bedroom stood a woman in a white dress, her eyes hollow and her skin pale. She was the one who had been haunting me. She slowly approached me, and I could feel a coldness emanating from her. I was paralyzed with fear. She whispered my name again, and I knew I had to do something. I remembered reading about a ritual that could banish ghosts from a house. I quickly gathered the ingredients and performed the ritual. As soon as I finished, the woman disappeared, and the house was filled with a sense of peace. From that day on, I never experienced anything strange in that house again. I realized that the woman was trying to tell me something, and I had finally helped her find peace. Crimson Hollow was no longer a town of fear for me. It was a town filled with ghosts, yes, but they were no longer haunting me. I had finally come to believe in the supernatural, and I knew that I could never leave Crimson Hollow. It was now my home, and I was at peace with that. I am the Cryptkeeper of the old abandoned cemetery, the last remaining caretaker of the resting place of the dead. For years, I have tended to the graves and watched over the souls of the departed. But little did I know that my own fate would become entwined with the cursed grounds I call home. It all started when a group of teenagers dared each other to spend the night in the cemetery on Halloween. They thought it would be a fun and thrilling experience, but little did they know the true horrors that lurked within the shadows of this place. As the night grew darker, I could sense their presence. I watched from afar as they laughed and joked, unaware of the danger they were in. But as they approached the entrance of my crypt, I knew I had to intervene. I tried to warn them, to tell them to leave before it was too late, but they didn't listen. They thought I was just a part of the spooky atmosphere, a decoration to add to their haunted adventure. But I am no decoration. I am the cursed Cryptkeeper, bound to this place by a dark magic that has been passed down through generations. My ancestors made a deal with the devil, promising to keep the souls of the dead at peace in exchange for eternal life. But with this eternal life came a price: to forever guard the cemetery and its secrets. As the night went on, the teenagers started to realize that something was not right. They could feel a cold chill in the air and hear strange whispers coming from the graves. But it was too late, they were already trapped. The gates of the cemetery had closed, and the only way out was through me. I could see the fear in their eyes as I emerged from the shadows. They tried to run, but my powers were too strong. I could control the dead, and they were my army. They dragged the teenagers into the depths of the cemetery, where they would suffer the same fate as me, to forever be trapped in this cursed place. As the years went by, more and more people fell victim to the curse of the cemetery. But I was always there, watching, waiting for my next victims. I had become a legend, a ghost story that parents would tell their children to keep them from wandering too close to the cemetery. But deep down, I longed for someone to break the curse and release me from this eternal torment. And then one day it happened. A young girl stumbled upon the cemetery, drawn in by the eerie atmosphere. But she was different from the others. She could see me for who I truly was, not a monster, but a cursed soul. She listened to my story and promised to help me break the curse. Together, we ventured into the depths of the cemetery, facing the dark forces that had kept me trapped for so long. With her help, we were able to break the spell, and finally I was free. But the cemetery was no longer a place of terror. It was now a place of peace. The souls of the dead were able to rest, and I was finally able to move on. As for the young girl, she became a dear friend, visiting me often and keeping my memory alive. And so, I am no longer the cursed Cryptkeeper, but a soul at peace. But I will always remember the horrors that haunted me in that old abandoned cemetery. And I will never forget the brave girl who helped me find my way out of the darkness. I never believed in ghosts or supernatural occurrences. I always thought they were just stories, told to scare children and entertain adults. That is, until I experienced it myself. It was a dark and stormy night, the kind you only read about in horror novels. I was driving through the countryside, trying to reach my destination before the storm got worse. The fog was so thick, I could barely see the road in front of me. Suddenly, my car started making strange noises and eventually came to a halt. I tried to start it again, but it was no use. I knew I had to find shelter before the storm got worse. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out of the car, leaving it behind. As I walked through the thick fog, I couldn't shake off the feeling that I was being watched. I brushed it off as my imagination trying to scare me. After what felt like hours of walking, I saw a small cabin in the distance. I quickened my pace and reached the cabin, relieved to find shelter from the storm. But as I stepped inside, I knew I had made a grave mistake. The cabin was old and abandoned, with cobwebs covering every inch of the walls. The furniture was covered in dust and the air was stale. I decided to explore the cabin, hoping to find a phone or some way to call for help. As I made my way through the rooms, I heard a strange noise coming from upstairs. It sounded like someone was crying. I cautiously climbed the creaky stairs, my heart racing with fear. The crying sound was coming from a room at the end of the hallway. I slowly pushed open the door and my blood turned to ice. In the corner of the room sat a figure with long, dark hair covering its face. It was crying, but it didn't sound human. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The figure slowly lifted its head, revealing a pair of glowing eyes in the fog. I let out a blood-curdling scream and ran out of the cabin, not stopping until I reached my car. I started the engine and drove away as fast as I could, not looking back. It wasn't until I reached the nearest gas station that I realized my hands were covered in scratches and my clothes were torn. I couldn't explain what had happened in that cabin, but I knew I never wanted to experience it again. From that day on, I never drove through the countryside at night, and I never doubted the existence of ghosts and supernatural beings. The eyes in the fog will forever haunt me, a reminder that some things are better left unexplained.